This is Juan Carlos Santana welcoming you to the second volume of The Essence of Dumbbell Training, the most comprehensive dumbbell work in the fitness and conditioning field. Volume 1 introduced you to the efficacy of dumbbell training and the what, how, and why of this great training modality. This second volume will focus on explosive power development and metabolic conditioning. We strongly recommend mastering the content in Volume 1 before advancing to the applications in this video. Our goal and purpose is to provide a working definition of power, discuss its relevance to human performance, describe some of the metabolic applications using explosive complexes, illustrate some of the progressions we successfully use with our clientele, and organize a comprehensive menu of exercises for your consideration. Always focusing on real-world application, we will also bring you live footage of our workouts. The live scenes allow you to see variations in movement across various populations and give you a flavor for what these exercises look like on the gym floor or on the field. The key objective with OPS is always to educate and inspire our colleagues and friends. To assist me in bringing you this information, my longtime friend and colleague Diane Vivas will add her comments on power training and lead you through some of her favorite progressions. She will explain where our methodology came from. Diane will also enlighten you to the how and why we developed our explosive protocols. Diane has been a national caliber athlete and trainer for many years and brings a refreshing and different perspective to all of our projects. Take it away, Dee.
Now, let's begin with the concept of power and why it's so important. In a nutshell, life is all about power. Everything we do in the conditioning and fitness world is geared around improving power output. Whether we are strengthening a grandmother so she can quickly pick up her grandchild, enhancing your athletic performance during weekend activities, or during elite competition, it's all about power, doing more work in less time. The explosive exercises we will use are rooted in the sport of Olympic lifting. The two competition lifts are the snatch and the clean and jerk. In the snatch, the weight is lifted from the ground to an overhead position in one quick move. The clean and jerk is a two-movement sequence where the weight is lifted from the ground to the shoulders, then from the shoulders to an overhead position. Apart from competition lifts, Olympic lifting incorporates numerous other exercises designed to help the different components of each lift. These strength and skill transfer exercises create an enormous repertoire of strength and power exercises. The main thing we like about this type of training is what my colleague and Olympic coach Mike Bergner calls training to the fourth power. That is, training in a standing position, explosively, with free weight, and using compound movements. It is important to realize that the focus of this training is to develop functional strength and power, not to create Olympic weightlifters. Therefore, we have added a fifth component, and now call it training to the fifth power. The fifth dimension is training in the functional manner. This means we have added multiplanar, functional movements which are specific to life, not weightlifting. We have also added the unilateral stimulus of a dumbbell. This also makes it more applicable to real-life situations. To begin, we would like to address one issue that is very controversial, the issue of explosive training. Some fitness professionals may be concerned with the safety component of this type of training, especially for the non-athletic population. To address this, we must first understand that this type of training is not for everyone. Due to our foremost concern for proper progression, it should be understood that everyone participating in this method of training must have a significant strength base and master the exercises in Volume 1 of this series. We must also realize that the term explosive means as fast as you can control. Therefore, although explosive means the same thing in terms of training, it looks different across various populations. What is explosive to a young athlete looks different to a mature individual, yet each of their efforts remains the same, 100% with control. For the athlete, the need for power is easily noted and understood. For the non-athletic population, the need for power can easily be seen in daily activities like playing with children, performing chores around the house, or partaking in your favorite hobby. Now Carlos will get to work on some of our favorite progressions, and I'll be back shortly with more key ideas and exercises.
The first order of business is to provide a general rule of progression to learn and perform these exercises safely and effectively. We generally follow these guidelines. We first explain the how and why of the exercise. Then we demonstrate it for the client. Showing a video is also a very effective alternative. We then allow the client to try the exercise using a weight that's heavy enough to get the feel, but not so heavy where the load becomes the main concern. Once correct execution is mastered, let the movement pick up speed. Most of these exercises can be mastered to an acceptable degree in a few sessions. Also, be aware that learning is training and training is learning. Therefore, take into account the volume of work performed during the learning phase when considering the total training volume. Now let's get to work. Volume 1 of this series discussed in detail the teaching cues for the basic exercises, as well as some of the movement deviations to look for. Therefore, we will keep the teaching cues to a minimum and refer you to Volume 1 for a review. The first exercises in this volume are remedial movements that improve and reinforce correct lifting mechanics of heavy loads or moderate loads at high speeds. These exercises are easily tolerated. RDL stands for Romanian deadlift. This exercise is excellent to teach what we call the power position and reinforces proper spine stabilization. It's excellent for strengthening the back and the hips. The toes can point slightly outward. The dumbbells contract the thighs and keep the arms and shoulders relaxed. From the side, notice the slight knee bend and hyperextended back. These positions are kept constant through the entire exercise. The squat is the most fundamental exercise in strength training. It teaches proper lifting mechanics during heavy loading, such as standing up from a chair while holding a child, or going up for a rebound. This exercise is also a must to reinforce the catching positions used in the upcoming cleans and snatches. Stand with feet shoulder width apart, with toes slightly outward. Keep the core tight and descend as low as flexibility and strength will allow. Keep the back set during the entire exercise. The dumbbells can be held in the hang position or the shoulder carry position. We prefer the shoulder carry position because it reinforces a more erect posture while providing great upper body stabilization work. Using unilateral loading in the squat simulates many daily and sporting activities. We use the parallel stance to acquaint us with the balance and postural adjustments needed for the single arm explosive lifts. However, we also use the staggered stances during this exercise. The one-arm overhead squat is a bit more forgiving than its two-handed counterpart. The reason is that due to the body's ability to rotate and laterally flex, less shoulder flexibility is needed. This movement is excellent for strengthening the shoulder and spine musculature. The overhead squat is an advanced exercise, especially with two dumbbells. It is an excellent exercise for shoulder stabilization and prepares you for many of the overhead receiving positions. It is not necessary to get into deep squatting positions for this exercise to be effective. Not everyone has this kind of flexibility. Go as deep as you can while keeping the dumbbells over the shoulders. If the dumbbells start to sway forward, your squat has gone below what your shoulder flexibility can handle. Try to keep the arms as straight as possible through the entire movement. This is what these prerequisite exercises look like in the gym. Now that we have these prerequisites out of the way, we can move on to the business of exploding under some weight. It is absolutely essential that you pay close attention to this section. These exercises will set up the pulling and overhead positions you will use in the rest of these exercises within this video. The easiest exercise to develop power in what we call triple extension is the clean pull. Everyone can do it. Triple extension refers to the simultaneous extension of the ankle, knee, and hip during movements such as running or jumping. This exercise reinforces the power position, similar to that of the RDL. Heels should be shoulder width apart, toes slightly outward. The hips are flexed and the back is set. The knees are slightly bent while the dumbbells travel over the thighs as you dip down into the power position. Keep the arms and shoulders relaxed through the dip. The dip stops when the dumbbell reaches a point just above the knees. Immediately explode up, simultaneously extending the hip and knees as if you were going to jump. Keep the arms and shoulders relaxed through the entire pull. At the top of the pull, add an explosive extension of the ankle and a shoulder shrug. This really accelerates the weight up. Relax the arms and let them bend as the momentum of the weight carries the dumbbells above the belt line. The single arm pulls are extremely functional for everyday lifting tasks. Of all of our athletes, our wrestlers love this exercise because of the similarity to some of the maneuvers they use. The position and movement is identical to the two-handed version except for the grip. The dumbbell can be held in line with the thigh or between the legs. We prefer the between the leg position because it allows the use of more weight. Notice the rotation of the trunk used to allow the weight to travel a straight and vertical path. Muscle snatches were discussed in Volume 1 due to their use in providing excellent training for the shoulder complex, especially the external rotators of the shoulder. This musculature will become very important when getting into and stabilizing the overhead position that is necessary for many of the exercises throughout this video. The movement combines a clean pull and an explosive upright row. The dumbbell is allowed to travel upward and eventually is pressed overhead. The single arm version is the easiest to perform because less shoulder flexibility is needed to stabilize the overhead position. It's an excellent prehabilitation exercise for the shoulder complex. Two-arm muscle snatches are a bit more challenging due to the additional shoulder flexibility required by the two-arm overhead position. Notice that the feet do not leave the ground and the back is kept straight and tight. This exercise, along with the overhead squat, is essential to excel in the snatch progressions. This is how we perform these pulling exercises on the gym floor. Now Diane will discuss the basic overhead lifts.
Overhead lifts are an excellent way to train the total body. Whether you're combating osteoporosis or an athlete trying to get the most of your training time, overhead lifts are hard to beat. Mastering the overhead squat and muscle snatch is essential for the success of an overhead lift. They will provide the shoulder flexibility and strength needed to stabilize the overhead position. The first in the upper body push progression is the push press. This fundamental exercise teaches you to use the legs to create upward momentum. We start with the single hand version due to the reduced flexibility requirements. Notice the starting position is similar to the squat using the shoulder carry position. The dip is essentially an explosive quarter squat. As the legs and hips extend, a shoulder press is executed. Notice the slight rotation in the trunk at the top of the press. This allows the entire body to distribute the range of motion necessary to properly execute this exercise. The two-arm push press is the essence of toenail to fingernail training. If there is a weak link in the body, this exercise will show it. The entire core must be kept tight and stable through the entire exercise to be executed properly. Try to lock out the elbows at the top of the press. perfect alignment of the dumbbells, shoulders, hips, and feet is ideal. However, a perfect lockout is not necessary to gain benefit from this exercise. Push jerks expand on the power developed by the push press. The only difference between the two exercises is the shuffling of the feet to accommodate a lower receiving position. The push jerk uses the same mechanics as the push press up to the beginning of the pressing motion. As the hips reach full extension, the feet are picked up as one pushes the body under the weight. The lower receiving position requires the weight to travel less distance, which allows more weight to be used. The single arm version also permits more weight to be used. This is due to lateral flexion and rotation of the core, as this version provides a greater summation of forces. The two-handed push jerk is a more advanced movement requiring superior shoulder strength and flexibility. Notice how important following proper progression becomes. The beginning position is just like the front squat. The dumbbells are propelled upward by the legs, as in the push press. And finally, the receiving position is identical to the overhead squat and muscle snatch, with the dumbbells over the shoulders perfectly aligned with the hips and feet. The elbows should be as extended as possible. Again, try to lock out the elbows in an overhead position. This alignment provides a bone-on-bone supporting structure and permits more weight to be used. A perfect lockout is not necessary to engage or benefit from this exercise. This is the reason we always emphasize mastering the previous exercises before going to the more advanced movements. Each one builds on the next and makes learning safe and fun. The split jerk is at the beginning of our split stance progression. It follows the learning sequence of the split squats and lunge and press combination from Volume 1. The beginning position is the same fundamental squat using a shoulder carry position. The dip and pressing motion is identical to the push press and push jerk. At the end of full hip extension, however, the feet are quickly split to a high lunge position as the weight is received overhead. We perform the single arm version first because there are fewer limbs to control and less flexibility is needed for the overhead position. This, however, is really a point of preference and not an absolute necessity. So if you want to learn the two-handed progression first, go right ahead. The two-handed split jerk is a much more challenging progression from a flexibility and strength perspective. Leg and hip power, along with hip flexion and shoulder flexibility, are emphasized in this power-packed exercise. The deeper and upright receiving position allows heavier loads to be utilized. Foot placement can be alternated within sets or between sets to provide more athleticism to the movement. Let's go live to our sessions and see some of the variations our clients use. I'll turn it back to Carlos for the discussion of cleans.
The clean and jerk progression is a total body and very athletic exercise. This progression builds on the squats and pulls we have already covered. However, the receiving position requires additional speed, stability, and athleticism. It should be noted that we will be concentrating on pulling from the hang position and receiving in the power position. Both of these positions are much higher than those used in Olympic weightlifting. The hang pull position usually keeps the dumbbell above the knees during the entire pulling phase. We also use lower pulls to strengthen deeper squatting positions. The lower receiving position used in the sport of weightlifting also allows greater weight to be handled, but requires extraordinary strength, skill, and flexibility. Cleans are an extension of the clean pulls previously discussed. At the top of the pulling phase, the feet are shuffled out to shoulder width and the body is pulled under the weight. The dumbbells are flipped in mid-air and land at shoulder height in a hammer grip. The receiving position resembles a half squat with the dumbbells in a shoulder carry position. The single arm clean provides a more functional unilateral loading pattern. This loading pattern brings in the transverse plane due to the slight rotation the core undergoes to decelerate the weight. During the loading phase of this exercise, the dumbbell can track to the outside of the leg or between the legs. The clean and jerk is the king of total body exercises. It is a two-movement complex, and several variations will be covered in the complex training section. In its basic form, one cleans the dumbbells to the shoulder, then follows with an explosive thrust from the hips and legs. This thrust provides upward momentum to the dumbbells. As the hips reach full extension, a shuffle of the feet is executed and the body is pushed under the dumbbells. This position requires excellent balance, flexibility, and strength. The receiving foot position can be a split or a parallel stance. The single arm version of the clean and jerk adds an asymmetrical loading stimulus. It requires a bit of skill in negotiating the dumbbell, especially during the shoulder and overhead transitions. Although this exercise uses less total weight than its two-handed counterpart, its asymmetry makes it a more intensive exercise. Now let's take a look at these exercises in action. The snatch is by far the most difficult and explosive power lift. This is especially true in regards to the flexibility requirements of the shoulder. As with the power cleans, the snatches we will use are power snatches. The power snatch is taught with a single hand at first. Unlike the power cleans, this exercise requires the hand pull to set the dumbbell between the legs. This position requires the trunk to laterally flex and rotate during the pulling phase. The overhead receiving position balances the dumbbell between the bases of support. This action also requires rotation and lateral flexion of the trunk. The ability of the trunk to flex and rotate during this exercise provides excellent core training and reduces the amount of shoulder flexibility needed to correctly execute it. The two-hand power snatch requires extreme flexibility and strength from the shoulders and paraspinals. The clean pull is used to create the upward momentum. At the top of the pull, the arms provide additional force with a quick motion resembling an upright row. As the dumbbells travel upward, the feet are shuffled to a squatting position, while the body is pulled under the moving dumbbells. The dumbbells are received overhead with locked out arms, a set back, and a lower body squatting position. Try to receive the dumbbells in the overhead squat position we discussed earlier. Split snatches are the most athletic lift you can perform. They combine the best of the power position and a split jerk position. The one-handed version is performed first because of the centered hand pull and the decreased flexibility requirements of the overhead position. Follow the same guidelines of the one-arm power snatch, except shuffle the feet to the position of the split jerk. The two-handed split snatch is by far the most challenging exercise in this video. The overhead position requires incredible shoulder flexibility and strength. The explosive split position also requires incredible balance and coordination. The combination of these two components makes this exercise a real killer. All of the instructions of the two-handed snatch apply here. However, as you're pulling yourself under the dumbbells, split your feet to the high lunge position of the split jerk. Let's see some real-world applications using these movements. Now, I'll turn it over to Diane so she can tell you about how to put together complexes using the lifts we have discussed.
The methodology of dumbbell complexes was extensively covered in our first volume of this series, and we refer you to that volume for a comprehensive review. This section will illustrate a few of our favorite complexes to show you the versatility of our training approach. We use these explosive complexes to develop metabolic conditioning in our clientele, especially our athletes. All exercises can be performed in any order or with either a single hand or a two-handed loading pattern. Complexes can also be performed in succession or sequence fashion. And for a killer metabolic challenge, circuits of 2 or 3 complexes humble most of our elite athletes. The clean and high pull combination is easy to perform and most people can execute it without difficulty. The power snatch and high pull is a great complex to train the extensor mechanism and the shoulder complex. The clean and push press makes a great learning tool for the clean and jerk progression. It's one of our favorites. The clean and push jerk is a bit more explosive than the clean and push press. Notice the shuffling of the feet and lower receiving position. clean and split jerk is the most athletic of the clean and jerk progression. The long but narrow base of the high lunge receiving position requires excellent balance. Now, if you think these complexes will make you work, imagine putting 3 explosive movements together. And now Carlos will explain why.
Three movement complexes really tax the body's metabolic engine. We have often seen heart rates go up to 100% of predicted values during our complexes, especially when multiple complexes are put together as a circuit. This complex finishes off one of the most challenging lifts in this video, the overhead squat. It is an awesome complex for stability of the shoulder. This series is just a clean and jerk, tweaked and broken down into parts. This combination is the most athletic, especially when performing the alternating split jerks. This complex shows how one can emphasize a specific lift. Here, an alternating snatch movement is emphasized using the split receiving position. Let's check out some of our clients using variations of these complexes to jack up their metabolic training. Diane and I will now discuss some of our field applications using releases and jumps.
Release exercises have been around since ancient times. From the discus to the shot put, throwing a heavy object for distance has long been a method of displaying power. Be careful to organize the field in such a way that the throwing lane is clear. A flying dumbbell is very dangerous and can cause serious injury. An area against the fence, away from the action, is perfect.
Jumps have also been accepted as a great power developing technique. Most of the tests used to measure lower body power are jump related. Thus, it makes sense to utilize this technique to develop power. The following are just a few of the throws and jumps you can perform with dumbbells.
Push toss is an excellent tool for athletes, such as football players and wrestlers. It requires a total body forward explosion from the power position. Keep the load light enough to be able to move with speed. One-arm versions can be performed and really kick it into another gear. Also, agility skills, such as scrambles, can be added.
The jump and toss is simply a push toss at the end of a long jump. In its basic form, the dumbbells are stabilized in the shoulder carry position through the long jump and then tossed forward. The more advanced version can start from a hang position. A clean is performed during the long jump and the toss is then executed.
The rip toss can be performed in several ways. You can toss and step with the same side, or you can toss and step with contralateral limbs. Once these versions are mastered, then an alternating pattern can be attempted.
This throwing exercise incorporates level changes using upper body explosive power, agility, and total body power. From a 6-point stance, an explosive push-up is performed. Once the body is about 45 degrees, the legs push and thrust the entire body forward. For additional demands, agilities can certainly be added to this exercise.
Jumps are the easiest way to develop explosive power in the lower body. The dumbbells can be carried in the hang, shoulder carry, or overhead position. Notice that the loads don't have to be heavy to get a great training effect from this exercise.
Split squats require an enormous amount of power and balance. As with the squat jumps, the dumbbells can be stabilized from the hang or the shoulder position. This provides you with plenty of variations to choose from.
This box jump is a combination of a clean and standard box jump. This exercise can challenge the best of the best. Surprisingly, it is not very difficult to learn. However, heavy loads can quickly elevate the intensity of this exercise.
Our last exercise is an oldie but goodie. It's a flashback to your old high school gym class. The squat, thrust, and jump is a total body exercise requiring flexibility and total body power. It's my favorite power and metabolic combination exercise. Now let's take a look at these exercises in action.
Well, what was your favorite exercise? Are you excited about getting your hands on a pair of dumbbells? I bet you are. They are one of the most awesome training tools available. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this information with you, and I hope you had as much fun viewing the video as we had bringing it to you.
Thank you, Diane. And it was certainly a pleasure having your insight and collaboration on this and all of our other projects. During all of this time, Gary has been behind the scenes doing some serious work and making sure that the right scenes made it into this great video. A special thanks to my friends Victor Verhage and Jim Roberts for their energy and encouragement during this project. As usual, the unsung heroes of these projects are our friends and family that support us during many lonely and long hours. They are our fuel and the spirit of our work. Thank you to Greg Salmons and Eddie Montilla for the editing and music genius. Their touch is all over us. Thank you both. Many thanks to Chris Palmer and Jamie Lee at Gold's Gym in Roswell, Georgia for welcoming our project with Southern hospitality. This is Juan Carlos Santana wishing all of you the will to power. Play for our friends, Eddie.